Welcome to Compelling Topics, the only channel dedicated to the perspective of leading researchers from the Italian independent scene. Let's turn your minds on. At the heart of the Apennines, where myth, history, and landscape intertwine, the figure of the Sibyl emerges as something far more complex than a simple oracle. Through the insights of Simonetta Torresi, this ancient presence takes shape as a crossroads of traditions, pagan and Christian, Celtic and classical, revealing a hidden network of symbols, places, and stories that stretch across Europe. What follows is a journey into that world, a territory suspended between light and shadow, where knowledge is never given freely, and every path demands a transformation. Simonetta Torresi opens the discussion by immediately distinguishing among the various traditions concerning the Sibyls. Varro lists 10 of them, yet the number most commonly recognized is 12, though some classifications count as many as 30. The Sibyl herself enumerates 10, while the number 12 carries particular symbolic weight, echoing the structure of the 12 apostles around Jesus. Just as one may refer to the apostles without explicitly mentioning Christ, so too the Sibyls are spoken of as a collective. What all these figures share is a prophetic nature. They are oracular women, prophetesses who deliver responses marked by obscurity and ambiguity, not readily intelligible at first reading. This stems from the fact that the Sibyls were in communication with the divine and, through it, issued their verdicts. In contemporary terms, Torresi observes, they would be described as women channeling higher energies. The Sibyl of Crown Mountain, namely, the one associated with the Sibillini Mountains, stands out sharply from all the others. She does not deliver oracles in the traditional manner, nor does she possess the typical traits of the other Sibyls. This singularity makes her a case apart. She is the only Sibyl to have given rise to an autonomous civilization, the so-called Sibylline civilization. She also lent her name to an entire Apennine mountain range south of the Marche region, the Sibillini Mountains themselves. In this area, there is a cave which is now inaccessible. Its entrance is blocked, and not as the result of any natural cataclysm. The cave was deliberately blown up, mined after the Second World War. According to some accounts, American troops were responsible. According to others, it was the local parish priest who had the operation carried out. What is certain is that the obstruction is intentional. Torresi reports having discovered that much of the research conducted in that area with modern instruments, including ground-penetrating radar, was funded by companies contracted for reconstruction work in earthquake-stricken areas of Marche and Umbria. This fuels the suspicion that interests difficult to disclose publicly lie behind the decision to seal the cave. Georadar investigations have revealed the presence of tunnels extending from the Sibyl's cave and terminating beneath the Pian Grande, with dimensions of roughly 1 meter by 1 meter. Yet news of these findings is never made public, and no one knows with certainty what has been uncovered. Torresi emphasizes that if the cave were of little significance, it would likely have been left open and developed for tourism. The fact that it was destroyed suggests a far deeper reason. Near Mount Sibylla stands Mount Vettor, where Lake Pilate is located, the only glacial lake south of the Apennine chain. This lake was not always known by that name. Until at least the 15th century, it was called Lake Sibylla. Fazio degli Uberti, in his Dittamondo from the first half of the 14th century, still refers to it as the Sibyl's Lake, mentioning Mount Pilate as the place where it is found. The name changed over time, and this shift is significant. Torresi notes that there is also a Mount Pilatus in Switzerland and the Pilate Mountains in France. All of this seems to point to a geographical and symbolic network linking distant places, consistently tracing back to the same Celtic and Germanic cultural sphere from which many of these traditions originate. The Apenninic Sibyl appears as a queen fairy attended by her maidens. It is said that these maidens, especially in the evening, would go out dancing, and that some of them had hooves instead of feet. Such legends remain vivid in the areas of Arquata del Tronto and Preterre, where people claim that the circles left by the Sibyl's dances can still be seen on the ground. Yet the maidens were not merely dancers. In the province of Macerata, for instance, they are known as the surveyors, because they are said to have taught farmers how to divide their land, in essence, passing on the principles of geometry. This tradition intertwines with the fact that the Apennine region of the Marche has long shown a strong inclination toward the exact sciences. Marcus Vipsanius Agrippa, the builder of the Pantheon in Rome, was originally from Visso, the main town of the Sibillini Mountains National Park. Before him, the town bore a different name and later became known as Visso from the Agrippa's name. The University of Camerino, traditionally oriented towards scientific disciplines, also fits within this same cultural lineage. The Sibylline maidens were thus both hoof-footed dancers and teachers of geometry, an amalgam of dreamlike and practical traits that defines the uniqueness of this civilization compared to any other oracular tradition of the ancient world. The Apenninic Sibyl, therefore, taught her visitors. She did not merely prophesy. Her cave was the destination of continuous pilgrimages, and her fame spread far beyond local boundaries. It is said that when Jesus was crucified, the Sibyl fled from her cave and Lake Pilate turned red with the blood of Christ, a phenomenon that in reality has a natural explanation in the presence of Chirocephalus marcusonii, a small crustacean that periodically colors the lake's waters. Legend, however, has it that the Sibyl took part in the cosmic transformation marked by the birth and death of Christ. All medieval Christian literature that speaks of the Sibyl refers simply to her, without specifying which one, not the Delphic, not the Cumean, not the Tiburtine, but simply the Sibyl. This detail, highlighted by Torresi, suggests that in the medieval period the term Sibyl referred to a single figure, that of the Sibillini Mountains. This is attested by Thomas of Celano in his Dies Irae, when he writes Testis David cum Sibylla, without any further qualification. Saint Benedict himself, before composing his rule, is said to have gone to the Sibyl's cave and entered it. It is even said that he left a sheet of paper to help him find his way out, one that was never recovered. This account comes down through John Giorgio Trissino and his Italia Liberata dai Goti, which explicitly recounts the visit. From Saint Benedict onward, testimonies multiply and become increasingly detailed. In Christian churches, the Sibyls are always depicted above the prophets. This iconographic scheme can be seen in the medieval Church of Visso, in the marble of the Holy House of Loreto, and in the sanctuary of the Madonna dell'Ambro at Montefortino, where the Sibyls date to the 17th century. In Montegallo, there is even a church dedicated to Santa Maria in Sibylla. Montegallo, a municipality in the province of Ascoli Piceno, has lost its original town center. Nothing remains of the original settlement, and it is unknown how, when, or why it was destroyed, yet its hamlets have survived, and the municipality is now based in one of them. Above the doorways of some houses in Altino and Monte Gallo there were inscriptions in a non-Latin alphabet, which Torresi was unable to photograph in time before restoration work erased them permanently. Similar traces of mysterious writings can still be found today, carved into the beams of fireplaces in local homes. Monte Gallo lies beneath Mount Vettor, near Lake Pilate. Lake Pilate has for centuries, indeed for millennia, been a gathering place for necromancers and practitioners of every kind of magic. It was here that they came to consecrate the Book of Command. Tradition even holds that Simon Magus himself passed through, which is entirely plausible given the site's long-standing reputation. The Book of Command is a black book, an oath, a decree by which one binds oneself to certain forces, dark, external, in exchange for fame, success, and power. In common terms, it is what is known as a pact with the devil. As Torresi notes, wherever there is light, there is also darkness, and the two principles inevitably accompany one another. It is not easy to discuss such matters in a popular context, since there is always the risk that someone, listening, might feel drawn to replicate those rituals, which, Torresi adds with a touch of irony, probably happens regardless. The consecration poem of the Book of Command, long and intricate, describes the ritual in detail, and Torresi postpones its full reading to another occasion. Lake Pilate and the Sibyl's cave thus functioned historically as two opposing yet complementary poles. The lake is a place of dark magic. The cave is a place of luminous initiation. Even today, people from all over the world reportedly gather around the lake each year to perform rituals. The lake and the cave were therefore, for centuries, centers of attraction for two different kinds of visitors: those seeking dark magic and power, and those seeking knowledge and inner transformation. Around Lake Pilate and Mount Sibylla, the very place names reflect this dual nature. In the area one finds Piso del Diavolo, Devil's Peak, and the Valle dell'Infernacho, Infernal Valley, which Torresi nonetheless describes as a place of striking natural beauty, unique and deeply evocative, traversable all the way to its source. It is as though the landscape itself bears the imprint of the tension between light and shadow that defines the entire Sibylline tradition. Cecco d'Ascoli, born Francesco Stabili, an Ascoli native and contemporary of Dante with whom he shared a kind of brotherhood, called by some a sect, by others the brothers in love, visited Mount Sibylla. Both men wrote vernacular poems, Dante the Commedia, Cecco the Acerba. They parted ways over questions of fidelity to their shared creed. According to Stabili, Dante had not remained faithful to it. Dante died a natural death. Cecco d'Ascoli was burned at the stake in Florence. His work, though prohibited, has nevertheless survived. In the third book of the Acerba, Cecco writes of a woman with whom he fully identifies, in whose presence he feels blessed, who reveals truths to him, and with whom he claims to be one, a mystical fusion with the figure of the Sibyl. It is certain that he ascended Mount Sibylla, as attested by a document preserved in Montefortino, in the province of Fermo. Cecco d'Ascoli was, in his time, a figure of the highest stature. Petrarch described him as the great man of Ascoli who illumines the world by the grace of the Most High. In Dante's age, he was therefore a cultural presence of comparable importance, even if today he is almost entirely forgotten. After him, Clarice Orsini, wife of Lorenzo the Magnificent, also visited the mountain. Before her ascent, she was hosted by the lords of Camerino and accompanied by the poet Luigi Pulci. The latter, perhaps somewhat skeptical at first, later wrote verses recalling his visit to Mount Sibylla and confessing that he still carried within him a spark of longing to behold those enchanted waters again. In his poetry, he explicitly mentions Cecco d'Ascoli and describes hydromantic, pyromantic, and geomantic rites performed in that place. These are but a few names in a long continuum of pilgrimage that spanned centuries and drew individuals of every origin and stature. Torresi then asks who the Sibyl truly was, given that she does not appear in the canonical lists of Sibyls, and yet was the most visited and renowned of them all. An important clue emerges from the opening of the Iliad. Homer invokes the muse, calling her diva, meaning goddess. It is the goddess who sings the story to Homer, and he who sets it down in writing. There is even a tradition that the Sibyl rebuked Homer for not faithfully recounting what she had dictated to him. This Sibyl goddess who addresses poets and guides their narration reappears in Virgil, when the author of the Aeneid says, "Tell me, O muse, of what has happened." Virgil turns to Calliope, the muse of epic poetry, whom Torresi associates with this same tradition. The muse and the Sibyl, the muses and the maidens, all are variations of the same archetype, daughters, according to Greek tradition, of Zeus and Mnemosyne, that is, memory, dwelling by the banks of rivers to preserve and transmit the stories of human events. A partial answer to the identity of the Sibyl also comes from the German tradition of Tannhäuser, which tells of a knight who journeys to the Venusberg, the mountain of Venus. In that tradition, the figure of the Sibyl is replaced by Venus herself. Torresi points out that the original Italic Venus was not the goddess of beauty later assimilated to the Greek Aphrodite. Rather, she was a divinity of gardens and cultivated land, closely tied to the earth and to natural cycles. It is therefore possible, Torresi suggests, that this divine figure invoked by Homer as diva, that is, goddess, and later giving rise to the Sibylline tradition, was in fact this archaic Italic Venus. Her maidens would then have spread in every direction, carrying with them the prophetic and initiatory tradition. Similar traces can be found in Scottish ballads and Irish tales, yet the only physical mountain around which all these legends coalesce is that of the Sibillini. When the Celts migrated northward, bringing their traditions with them, these stories followed, multiplying into local variations. The Tannhäuser legend was later set to music by Richard Wagner, who spent a considerable period at Palazzo Giustiniani Bandini, within the Abbey of Fiastra, where he was hosted together with Franz Liszt, a relative of the palace's owners. The territory on which the residence stands is shared between the municipalities of Tolentino and Orbisaglia. It was there, in that landscape dense with symbolic meaning, that Wagner encountered the stories of the Valkyries and of Tannhäuser. Everything returns, Torresi observes. This Sibyl, seemingly absent from the canonical lists and never depicted like the others, may in fact be the progenitor of them all, the source from which the others emanate. The figure of Melusine, the mermaid fairy of French tradition, is also present in this region. In medieval churches across the Marche, capitals display an abundance of double-tailed mermaids. In Visso, inside the Collegiata, the large fresco of Saint Christopher features, at his feet, a mermaid painted in the water. Yet the most remarkable example is a basin from Castel Sant'Angelo di Visso, now preserved in the convent of San Salvatore and repurposed as a holy water font, bearing an exquisitely carved double-tailed mermaid, truly unique of its kind. Torresi also points out that in Bomarzo there exists a monumental representation of this same figure, often referred to as the Etruscan siren. Melusine can be associated not only with the Sibyl, but also with the Muses, the 9 daughters of Zeus and Mnemosyne, who dwelled along riverbanks, safeguarding and transmitting the narratives of human events. Once again, the circle closes upon itself. The other Sibyls, those traditionally enumerated, functioned differently. They gave their responses directly to those who consulted them, though often in obscure terms. The Delphic Sibyl, for instance, answered questions but in an ambiguous manner, leaving interpretation to the seeker. The Sibyl of the Sibillini, by contrast, did not prophesy spontaneously. She answered only those who had undertaken the path, those who had passed the trials. Whoever entered the cave with awareness, after an initiatory journey, could learn from her who they truly were and what their origins might be. This is the core of the story of Garin Meschino, set in the time of Charlemagne, in which the protagonist ascends Mount Sibylla to ask the Sibyl about his parentage. The answer is not immediate. It requires overcoming symbolic trials, fierce beasts, embodiments of fear, and obstacles of every kind. Antoine de La Salle, whose travel account is considered by scholars to be the basis for Garin Meschino, was sent by Agnes of Burgundy to verify the stories surrounding the Sibyl. He first visited Lake Pilate and then Monte Monaco, where the cave is located. He was unable to pass beyond the entrance hall, but he gathered testimonies from locals, especially a priest, who described the interior in vivid detail. 2 iron gates that slammed shut, a bridge that appeared impossibly narrow but widened for those who crossed it with true awareness, dragons guarding the path, and finally doors of crystal. Garin Meschino thus emerges as the Italian counterpart to the German Tannhäuser, just as the Sibyl mirrors the Venus of the Venusberg. The parallel with the Holy Grail is equally striking. The path described by de La Salle, iron gates, the narrow bridge, dragons, crystal doors, is identical to that found in Arthurian romances describing the quest for the Grail. Only Galahad, among the Knights of the Round Table, succeeded in finding it, and he was also the one worthy of drawing the sword from the stone. It is said that the court of King Arthur was in Cornwall, yet Torresi notes that the only tangible sword in the stone is in Italy, in the province of Siena, near the church of San Galgano Abbey. In the rotunda of Montecipi Chapel, a sword has remained embedded in rock for centuries. The connection between the Sibyl's legend and that of the Grail is not merely suggestive. The narrative structures are identical. Among the traditionally listed Sibyls is also the Persian Sibyl, considered by some traditions to be the first, or among the first, and said to have been a daughter of Noah. This, Torresi observes, once again leads back to Monte Monaco, since tradition holds that Noah himself arrived there, on the mountain near the Sibyl's cave. If the Persian Sibyl, daughter of Noah, is among the earliest, and Noah is linked to Monte Monaco, the circle tightens further around this Apennine region as a possible point of origin for the entire tradition. Monte Pennino is another node in this sacred network. There, with Romanization, the Celtic god Pen, an Apennine deity, became Jupiter Penninus. On Monte Pennino, stelae and votive objects have been discovered, and there was almost certainly an altar. What once stood there is known through documentation, yet officially everything has been lost. At Lake Pilate, however, a stone bearing peculiar inscriptions still survives, preserved in the Museum of Monte Monaco, with markings similar to those once seen in Monte Gallo. These sacred mountains were dotted with altars and places of worship, evidence of an ancient religiosity that long predates both Romanization and Christianity. The Apenninic Sibyl, Torresi concludes, may well be the progenitor of all Sibyls, the first and the only one, from whom all others derive their name, function, and tradition. This eternal figure, likened to the phoenix that never truly dies but is reborn from its own ashes, embodies a fundamental lesson. Any knowledge worth attaining demands a path, an effort, a form of payment, not necessarily in money, but in labor, study, and inner growth. Knowledge is never obtained for free. The Cumaean Sibyl demonstrated this with Lucius Tarquinius Superbus. She offered her books at a fixed price, and each time the king refused, she burned 3 of them, returning with the same price for the remainder. In the end, the king understood, consulted the haruspices, and yielded. These were divine gifts, and to refuse them was folly. Knowledge has a cost, and that cost never diminishes simply because one hesitates. That's all for today. See you in the next episode of The Very Origin of Europe, here on Compelling Topics.
I went to